Welcome to the S.E.M podcast. I'm Jack Bryce, again with Zack Hewlett hosting our podcast today, and we're joined by Justin Wong, who we're excited to have on. We've heard his name a few times, and he said he's going to clear up some of that today.
Yeah, no, hopefully all good things. I don't know, probably not if you had Christian on. So we'll see, but I'll do my best to clear things up, or at least say my piece. But thank you guys for having me. I've been listening on and off to the podcast. You guys are doing some great work here, and as I listen to some of the podcasts, it brings back some great memories. So thank you all for doing that.
Yeah, it does bring back great memories. We've been loving doing this. So where are you calling from tonight?
I am calling from Detroit, Michigan, about 20-30 minutes from Detroit. So again, first thing to clear the air again, I don't mean to rag on Christian this whole call, right? This is not the purpose of this podcast, right? But not in Texas anymore. I did grow up in Texas, so he's correct there. But in Michigan now, moved here about a year or two ago. Loving it.
Great.
What took you there, Justin? I'm sure you'll cover it, but that's a unique place to go from Texas to Michigan.
Yeah, we kind of went. It was first kind of Hong Kong, Utah, Texas, and then Michigan. So
Okay.
this is actually the first, and we came up here to answer your questions, Zack, for a job.
Okay.
And you might find out about me very quickly. I get really long-winded about stuff, so just be like, hey, Justin, we gotta move on, man. So but so I'm up here for like a new job opportunity. What's really interesting is my wife's family. We can get into this later. She's from Hong Kong, so she grew up in Hong Kong. My parents are now in Hong Kong and China, so we don't really have a support system. And especially in Michigan, we just don't know anyone, but we just felt impressed. Hey, let's go to Michigan, and it's worked out. Funny how that works. So,
wow,
that's amazing, awesome.
This is a beautiful time of year to be up there.
It is for Jack. Another 2 weeks. We had we had our first snow. If you can't believe it or not, I don't know if you both are in Utah. I think Zack, if I remember right, you're in Colorado.
Yeah,
right?
We actually both live in Colorado.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you've had your first snow yet, but we had ours, on Friday last week. And then it's been kind of great weather since. It's been like 60s and 70s, so it's been great. But a couple more weeks, hopefully it holds out. So
yeah.
I did grad school in Ann Arbor, so it was nice up there to see the seasons at least.
Oh, those might be kind of fighting words depending where you're at, in Michigan, right? So
I know.
That's a great school, Jack. If in great area too. So we've been down there a couple times. We're actually like 20-30 minutes from Ann Arbor, so we go down often.
Cool.
It's awesome.
All right. Well, we'll start with how you got to Scotland, so pre-mission. Then we'll skip over, see what you've been up to, get a little more detail about all the moves you've made and what you've been up to since the mission, and then we'll go back and reflect on the mission. So if you want to start us out with how you ended up in Scotland, wherever you want to start that story.
Yeah, for sure. So back when I was a wee boy, at the ripe old age of, I guess, 1, so I moved from the U.S. to Hong Kong. So I was born in Texas. So I'm a Texan through and through. I bleed a particular color of orange, burnt orange. We'll get into that later, but I went to UT Austin. But I lived in Hong Kong with my kind of grandparents when my parents were finishing school at BYU and in Dallas and things. And so I came back when I was 6 or 7 to the U.S. So Chinese is my first language, but English is my primary and essentially my native language, right? And then grew up in Texas, went to UT Austin, again, bleed orange, and then went to growing up, I'm like a second generation member of the church. So my parents, they both joined the church when they were in Hong Kong. This all matters. I'm going to tie this together, right? But my dad especially, he went on his mission to Hong Kong. So he joined the church when he was 9, relatively young. And then he wanted his mission to Hong Kong, and he's very proud of that, right? And sometimes I could tell that as well. Kind of growing up, he's like, okay, son, it's kind of a done deal. You're going to go to Hong Kong, on your mission, right? Or somewhere in Asia, somewhere foreign speaking. So after I finished high school, it was around 17. So I had like a year, this is back in the time when, 19 was mission age, right? So I had a gap year to fill. So that's when I kind of finished up my first year, freshman year at UT. And during that year, I think we had a tacit agreement first. Okay, Dad, I'll fill out the mission papers, right? Don't worry, I got this. I will put in my papers that I'm fluent in Chinese. I will put, or even kind of pretend that I'm fluent in Spanish, so that I only did like Spanish in high school. We'll kind of put that on there too, right? And then lo and behold, I submitted my call, right? Obviously, my parents helped. We did all the kind of medical exams and all the other stuff, right? Submitted my call, and then it's around the time when my call is coming in. So I was talking to my parents. I was like, okay, I'm still in Austin right now. You guys are in Dallas. So again, that's like 3.5-hour drive. So there's a lot of planning ahead, right, to make sure kind of to announce the mission call and things and do it right, right? And so I thought we had like some sort of agreement per se, or some sort of understanding that, hey, son, we're going to wait. And kind of this falls into your story, Zach, a little bit. I wasn't checking the mailbox because I couldn't, right? I was in Austin, right? But I was kind of expecting like a call to say, hey, son, your call came, right? Hey, come back this weekend, drive back this weekend. We'll open it together in front of friends and family. It'll be sunshines and butterflies, right? Instead, I remember this vividly, not to the day, but I just got out of class. I was doing something in my dorm, right? I was just doing homework or whatever, right? But my dad called me, and I was like, okay, this is it, right? This is the call. I'm going to go back this weekend. And the first thing that he said was essentially, son, did you put that you were fluent in Chinese on your call or on your app papers or what, on your application? Did you put your, and I was like, yes, I did. Right. And I was like, what happened? And he's like, you're going to Scotland, son. I don't know what happened, but I'm like, there's like, so that's kind of how I found out about my call, right? Is essentially my dad called me, and I think he was so, I can't blame him because, and I don't, right? It's something we laugh about now, but it's mainly because I think I grew up in a Chinese branch as well, just growing up. And so I think there was just, on paper, I was supposed to go somewhere in Asia, right? Or go kind of foreign speaking, right? And I did, Scottish is different, right? So,
that's right.
Yeah, right. So, essentially, that's how I found out about my mission call, right? Is my dad calling me and saying, hey, you're going to Scotland, and what's going on,
Wow.
And so it was a lot to take in, because I was like, one, I thought we had like, an agreement, guys, like you're going to wait until I get home and we're going to do this all together and it'll be all great and stuff. And it wasn't that. And then second, I was like, where is Scotland? Like, I think I was like trying to process both of those feelings at once. And so, and then I also at the same time trying to, I think, calm down my dad and say, hey, filled out the papers right. So it's all kind of little chaos all together. But after all that, when we talked it through about a week later, I think we were all just generally excited, right? And so I've never been to Scotland, so it's like, this is great. And so, and on my call, right, it said English speaking, right? So I had no perception or idea that I would eventually kind of be called to be Chinese speaking or called to minister to the Chinese people in Scotland.
Yeah.
And so at that time I was like, okay, yeah, going to the Preston MTC 2 weeks, great. And I didn't for some reason I felt deprived of the Provo MTC experience. I was like, why can't I go to Provo? I'm like, oh, okay, fine, I'm speaking English, right? So anyways, I go to the Preston MCC, and
what was the timing of this, Justin?
This is around, man, I don't remember, and I'm terrible with timing, and I should be better at this. But I think this was a couple months. This was around. So I got to, I think, Preston in August. So I started my mission mid-August. I got to the mission in 2006. Sorry, 2006. So
okay,
so I started from 2006 to 2008, and so I was mainly kind of with President Fredrick. This is, I think, when President Fredrick just came in not too long ago. I think for 1 or 2 transfers, right? Mm-hmm. So that was around kind of the timing there, right? And so that's how I kind of learned about my call, and And then I can keep going, or we can kind of go on to kind of after mission now. But I can essentially, when I got to the mission home, I can go into this a little later. But that's when I essentially found out that I'd be kind of my call was changed to Chinese speaking, essentially.
Interesting.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, we'll break it there. We'll go home from.
Yeah, sorry guys, I'm kind of all over the place. So first podcast.
You're good.
Yeah. Home from the mission. Tell us about your experience. Since then, what you've been up to.
Yeah. So what have I been up to? So I've been home. Y'all have been home longer than me, right? But I came home August 2008. Just jumped right back into school, right? So that was just great. So I think had I not done that, I think I would have just kind of just thought about a lot of stuff. Thought maybe had like a midlife crisis if you can even have that in 21, right? But it was great just to move from one thing to just another important thing, right?
Yeah.
Just education and things. So I was able to just jump back right into school at UT. Dated a bit. I had obviously the interview with President Fredrick. Your next mission is to find a wife, start an internal family. And I was like, okay, I'll do that, right? I'll do that, but take my time, right? So I finished school at UT, and then I went to law school at BYU for 3 years, and that's when I met my wife. So my wife Hazel, and we got married when I was about 25. So at about 2012. So we've been married for about 10 years. If we have time for
law
this.
School as well?
She was not. So far from. And I think this segues into the story, I guess. But she was an animation major. So, I think more analytically. She thinks a little bit more kind of artistic, if that's even a way of kind of thought, right? But very free flowing. But she's just one of those individuals that's just naturally smart, which just sometimes irritates the heck out of me sometimes because she just catches on to things so quick. But aside from that, I think I was her home teacher when home teaching was a thing, right? So I was her home teacher. I was dating someone else at the time, but then that didn't work out, and so I was still her home teacher. I think there's a time I think they saw me kind of walking alone somewhere because I was kind of going to meet up with friends, like, oh, look at this guy, he's all alone. Isn't he your home teacher? Don't you feel sorry for him? You should invite him to hang out with us. And so we did, and we hung out a couple of times. And I think Hazel doesn't mind me mentioning this, but essentially she's very straightforward. She says her mind, right? So kind of one of the first things that she said was like, Justin, you're in law school. There's a particular personality that goes to people that are in law school. You guys are all arrogant and think you guys know everything or pretend to know everything, whatever. And she's like, I'd never date a lawyer. I'd never date anyone in law school. And in my mind, I was like, oh.
Never say never.
You see where I'm going, Jack. Exactly. So so I was like, okay, challenge accepted, right? And so a couple months later, we dated, and then I think we got engaged after 6 months, and then we got married after a year. Got married and sealed in the Mount Timpanogos Temple. All very important, relevant information for this podcast, right? But afterwards, I think we have one daughter, so she's 6. She's 6 years old. She's the apple of our eye. Anything she says goes with me. Again, something else that we're working on at home. Hazel's kind of the enforcer at home. So
she kindergarten.
She's first grade now. First grade. So, but like I guess career-wise, after law school, I worked several jobs just as in-house counsel. Some just around the states, in Utah, in Texas, and then now in Michigan. So now I work for a tier 1 automotive component manufacturer that supplies lighting and sensing kind of headlamps essentially to just OEMs, just Tesla, BMW, and other kind of automotive manufacturers. So
that's big business in Michigan.
That is, and you probably know, Jack, right? It's huge here, and so I'm no exception. And so I'm loving it so far. Previously, I was in-house counsel at a cosmetics company, so my wife loved that. I think she got some killer discounts on some product, but it's a lot easier waking up to cars and automotive than cosmetics. So
good,
but that's the latest, and we're here. We're in Detroit, or not far from Detroit, and we're loving it, loving our ward, just loving life. So
that's great.
That's
all
cool.
right. So now you can go back to the mission. If you want to talk about the MTC experience or jump right to Scotland, whatever you want to do there.
Yeah, sure. I think MTC, there's, I was terrible at many things, and one of which I don't think I should even say this, but just a terrible kind of journal keeper and terrible with keeping in touch with people. So that doesn't do well in recalling kind of information, for podcasts like these, right? But I think one thing I remember in the MTC, I think one of my first companions was Elder Bailey. He was in Idaho. He was from Idaho Falls, and I think that was my real kind of experience with, individuals that were kind of ingrained in kind of church kind of culture and doctrine, right? Because I grew up in Texas, and I was one of kind of 5 members in my high school, right? So it was great because I had friends that were eventually kind of defending me and say, hey, he can't have coffee, or he can't have caffeine, or sometimes they go kind of too extreme. He can't have candy. I'm like, no, that's not true. I can have that, right? But it was great. It was great to have, and it's just a different kind of mentality a little bit, and the one that I've come to appreciate. I was like, man, that's just so great, right? To be able to kind of have that environment and things, and so that's something kind of that stuck out to me at the MTC was when everyone was kind of raising their hands or kind of saying, hey, where are you from? And I was like, I'm from Texas, and then 80 or this is not a true statistic, but 60 to 70 or majority, right, of individuals from Utah, Idaho, or Arizona, right? And so that kind of stuck out to me. It was just it was a great experience just hearing kind of, okay, well, this is how I grew up. I had a chapel like 5 minutes from me. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Like the temple was like 10 minutes from me. That's great. Mine was like an hour away. They were like, you know, yeah. But anyways, that wasn't true. That's not what they were like. But it was great. I think that kind of time really flew by for me. The 2 weeks. It's really what I remember is just very intensive. Kind of. I think that was when Preach My Gospel is still pretty new. And so very intensive in kind of drilling into us kind of what Preach My Gospel means and things. And then after that, that was essentially, long story short, that was all blur, right?
Yeah. I was surprised to find out you guys were 2 weeks. I didn't know they'd cut it down by then because Zack and I both went for 3 weeks.
Yeah, we both went 3 weeks. The last week was honestly probably a waste of time because we were just like, all right, we get it. Let's go.
See, you're probably right. It was probably 3 weeks. See, it was all blur. So you're probably right. And so this, I think 2 to 3 week kind of range just I think just kind of flew by for me. And then here I am on this train. I believe it was a train that took me from Preston to I think to Edinburgh, right, or close by. And then and then I think the elders picked us up, right, to take us to the mission home. And at that point, I had a feeling like when I got into the mission home, it just felt like a different aura in the sense that people knew who I was, but I had no idea who anyone else was. Because I found out later of this that they knew that there was a Chinese-speaking missionary coming. And at this point, I had no idea. I was I just felt I'm going to be teaching the gospel in English, right? And that's kind of it, not kind of it, but I'm excited. Let's go, right? And essentially, when I got into the mission home, I'm like, hey, I'm Elder Wong. It's like, oh, you're Elder Wong. Oh, hey, Elder Wong. And then I kind of got that from kind of some of the office elders or even kind of when we're going through, and I'm like, oh yeah, we know you, right? And I'm like, who are you? Like, I don't know you. And so eventually, I think, when it got to the point where we were, even to the point when my trainer was assigned to me. So my trainer was Elder Marcus McBride.
That's right.
Great missionary at the time. And it was, I knew my trainer, and even at that point, I didn't know I was Chinese speaking. It was after that. So after we got our trainers, I think President Fredrick pulled me aside, or I don't recall if it was President Fredrick or perhaps one of the assistants, but I think it was President Fredrick. But essentially, it's like, can we talk, right? Elder Wong, can we talk? And so that's essentially when I found out. President Fredrick essentially said, well, Elder, we know on your call said kind of English speaking, and I'm paraphrasing now, but essentially, we've been kind of expecting you for a while, and while your call says English speaking, you're called to serve as a Chinese speaking missionary in Scotland. And part of me was like, oh yes, I can go back and tell my dad, I'm not a complete failure. No, but you know what I mean? It was
Yeah.
exciting, right? It
Yeah.
was exciting, but then the other part of me was like, oh, and I don't know if I've told anyone this, let alone some close friends or my wife and things, but I was like, oh, like I'm going to be a Chinese speaking missionary. What does that mean in Scotland? Right?
Mhm.
Especially because my trainer, he didn't speak Chinese.
Nope.
Yeah.
And just we can go into the history later, but essentially none of my other companions spoke Chinese. And so I was like, how is this going to work? Right. And so that goes into kind of with training with Elder McBride, right? Is a lot of it was for me was just really learning how to be a missionary, but at the same time learning how to be a Chinese speaking missionary too, all at once, right? And I had help because at that time they had there were several, I think, recent converts that were Chinese already in the Edinburgh ward. I suspect that's why they were kind of really pushing for a Chinese speaking missionary. But Carol Du, Yirong, and also Yu Yi. And Yu Yi, well, we can talk about a lot later. But he was just a great, just stalwart kind of support throughout the mission, just as a great member missionary. But at that time, I just remember we were just building the area. Our area was called Chinatown. Right now that I think about it, there would probably be a more PC name for that, but it was called Chinatown. Right. So, better for worse, it's called Chinatown. I was excited. Right. And so we were, we just essentially did, I think as any English speaking missionaries, we were just tracked. Right. And we would knock on doors and we would set goals around knocking on doors and lessons taught and the like. And but how it worked differently, I guess, is when we found an English speaking investigator, we would always kind of refer it to the sisters or to the elders in the area, in that particular area in Edinburgh, right? And when the sisters or elders chapped into a Chinese speaking um, investigator, they would refer them to us. And naturally, just by law of statistics, we referred more investigators out than we were referred investigators, right? And in this transfer and this time with Elder McBride, there was just a time that I was just like, oh man, can we just have kind of one solid Chinese investigator? And sometimes I was just wondering throughout the transfer, was like, Heavenly Father, like, are you sure this is what I'm supposed to be doing, right? Because it just seems like I'm an engine to refer, which is fine, right? To refer investigators to other missionaries, which is great, but can I have some investigators or missionaries of my own? And lo and behold, perhaps comes story one that is an epic failure, but still kind of just remains kind of vivid in my mind. Is that there was one day there's this essentially retirement community that is essentially a Chinese retirement community. I think in Asian culture, it's important for the sons or for the family to take care of the elderly, and so there was essentially this dedicated Chinese kind of community or area where it was essentially a retirement home, right? And I got really excited because we got into this area and the signs were in Chinese. I was like, okay, here we go,
Yeah.
right? Let's do this. And so we did our best. Use kind of we're able to get into this particular retirement home. It was like 10 stories, 20 stories, what have you. And we knocked. The lady. We just kind of buzzed like we do, right? Just buzz, and we're missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We're here to share a message of happiness and peace. Will you let us in? Give us 5 or 10 minutes of your time to share a message with you. And so when we got in, that someone let us in, right? And I was doing this all in Chinese. So that's another aspect I'll talk about later. My companion, Elder McBride, didn't really know what I was saying, right? But anyways, we got in. And so I kind of told Elder McBride, we're in, right? And so we were going up to like the apartment number. And here comes this 70-year-old lady. This is, and just keep in mind, guys, when I say epic failure, it's just keep in mind, just cut me some slack. This was like a month into my mission, right? So we have there's a 70-year-old lady. I think this was essentially her retirement home. She was like the big fish in the retirement home. only spoke Chinese. We were up like the third or fourth floor. We were going up to this apartment, and this lady, essentially in Chinese, was like, "Hey, what are you doing here? Right? You need to get out." And this lady, she's shorter than me. She's shorter than me and Elder McBride. She had this cane. She's like, "Get out. What are you doing?" And essentially, kind of, at that time, I just panicked. I was like, because I was never really put in that situation where it was like, "Hey, you're not welcome," right? Eventually, like throughout my mission, I got used to it, right?
Yeah.
But this is like my kind of first real awakening of rejection, right? And essentially, long story short, this 70-year-old lady and her friend that just came in along the way chased us down slowly but surely down 4 flights of stairs and essentially kicked us out of the retirement home. So if you can just imagine that, I just imagine that still vividly. And again, that not an epic failure in the sense of staying strong and trying to push through and like standing strong in the face of rejection, but that was not the time that I did that. Right. So essentially we got chased out by this 70-year-old lady. And throughout my mission, I always wanted to get back into that retirement home or complex, but never was able to. And so I think that moment, what I was supposed to learn there is again rejection, but at the same time, at this time, Elder McBride does not know what's going on because these ladies are
Yeah.
always speaking Chinese. It's like he sees me coming, just pushing back slowly but surely. He's like, "Hey, Elder Wong, what's going on? Like, what are they saying?" I'm like, "They're telling us to get out." And so I'm like, and it's like, Elder McBride, "Are you sure? Can you just tell them that we're here to see someone?" It's like, "No, they're just telling us to get out." So we eventually got out, and I think to this day, or sometimes just back then, Elder McBride always kind of gave me a hard time, saying, "Hey, remember that 70-year-old lady? Every time, sometimes when we saw each other during Zone conference, remember her? Yeah, you remember that experience? That was terrible." Yeah, but anyway, so that was kind of my first kind of taste of kind of rejection there, and it was really it's really kind of eye opening in the sense that and, at that point I was just super embarrassed, and two, I was like, what am I doing? Like, what's going on? I thought that I had something here. I thought that, this was like a gold mine, in
Yeah.
a sense. And I thought that, there was going to be success that came out of that, but there just wasn't. Right. And that whole transfer time with Elder McBride was really kind of figuring out like how to do things. And it took me a little bit longer too.
Sure.
Um, yeah, but
It's a whole nother
essentially,
dimension being trained, but you're the only one who speaks the language that you're doing the work in. That's a
Yeah.
real that's different than anything any of us experienced, other than those coming like from Europe who were learning English, but at least their companion understood the
yeah,
Scottish.
no,
So
it was just so different, Jack. It was it was different in the sense that sometimes I felt as well, like with my companions, it's like I feel bad, but what do I do? I'm here to kind of communicate to these individuals in Chinese, to the best that we could. I think we also kind of taught in English, right? So because we taught a lot of university students and wanted to practice their English, so it was great, right? We had a lot of teachers in English eventually, but at the beginning it was mainly Chinese, and so it was. I felt bad as well because we're supposed to teach like two by two, right? And here I am just by myself, and it was honestly it was kind of lonely. It was kind of trying to figure out kind of why am I here? Like I'm not seeing success. Um, I'm being chased out by 70-year-old ladies. And I'm still trying to get a command of the language, right? Because for me, I'm fluent, but my way of thinking, right? I grew up in the U.S., right? So it was also kind of a culture kind of adaptation as well
yeah.
to kind of be on the same kind of wavelength as investigators or friends that were kind of coming from China and other areas in Asia. So it's an interesting time.
So
I'm
you
just
spent
gonna, sorry, real quick, Jack.
yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna recollect on the first time I met you, and you probably don't remember this, and I don't remember it nearly as vividly as I probably should, but I remember when I first introduced myself to you. I think we are at the mission home for like a zone leader conference or something,
Mhm.
and you happened to be there at that point in time. And I said to you, I said, "So, hi, Elder Wong, where are you from?" And you said, "I'm from Texas." And then you said to me, "But I speak Chinese, and I don't know why I'm here." And I was like, Okay,
That
well,
sounds like me. Yep.
and honestly, like, it was quite an interesting first interaction that we had. But I was like,
Mhm.
there's clearly a reason you're here. I'm sure I reassured you and just said, hey, just keep doing what you're doing. Everything will work itself out. But that was towards the end of my mission, and you're just
Mhm.
starting out. But I knew when you had Elder McBride, you'd be okay, because
Mhm.
he's always been a great stalwart missionary and very, very good in the leadership roles that he had served in prior to training you too. So I knew you were in good hands.
No, and he was great, Zach. And I'm sorry, I don't remember that interaction, but that sounds exactly what I would say. And I'm pretty sure you're thinking this kid is crazy. Like, I'm glad I'm leaving. See you later, Elder Wong. But
No, I didn't think you were crazy at all. And in fact, as time progressed, I mean, that was probably in my third to last transfer. Just hearing the successes that you were having in the remaining part of my mission, I was just like, I knew he'd figure it out. It's just a matter of when, not if.
yeah, and it was, it's sometimes so hard to see kind of what's the saying? I think kind of hindsight's 2020, or and sometimes it's hard to have like a bird's eye view when you're just in the thick of it, right?
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
butchered that, but anyways, I think it's and it was just so tough at that time. It was just more woe is me, right? And I think Elder McBride did a really good job of saying in an Elder McBride kind of way, right? Hey, suck it up, figure it out, right?
Right.
And I think that's what I did, right? I think and I think what really helped, interestingly enough, was Elder McBride was a great trainer, and I think I could rely on him a lot, just because he has a great communication style, great teaching style. I learned a lot from him, but I felt like I was leaning on him a little bit on in certain situations as well, right? And how to be a missionary, other things, and so I just was able to rely on him. But I think when he left the area, and I got a new companion. That's when I started to grow, right? Essentially with Elder Gregerson, and Elder Gregerson was great. And I think we again it was tough because I was still trying to figure things out at that time, and we tried. I think I kid you not, just many things, right? We tried English class. Never taught English class in my life, but we did that, right?
Yeah.
We did basketball, which surprisingly, I think I'll go into this later. I feel like a great story on kind of a conversion story with basketball. That worked out great. I think it's just great because, and hopefully edit this out, Zach, similar to what you did for Christian, right? Or not, right? But is Chinese people like to think they can play basketball, they can ball, right? And so we got a lot of interest with that, and so we all think we're Jeremy Lin, but I think it was just really that's when I was really kind of trying to starting to figure things out, right? I was having to, like, the safety net was taken away, right? I had to kind of
Mhm.
work through adversity, work through kind of just on my own with the tools I had, and just every day studying, preach my gospel, kind of working down the McBride UG, right? This member missionary that kind of we met with kind of regularly, he was a great support, but slowly but surely figuring things out. And I just recall, I think it was, in that time with Elder Gregerson, I was able to just really kind of mold, and he was great to help to do that, right? And Elder Gregerson, he's great, he's loving, and he's very straightforward sometimes with direction, right? So I remember, and again, not to perpetuate a stereotype, just again edit this out, right? But I think after a year, I think your international driver's license expires, right? So this is going along with the trend in your podcast of just terrible driving stories, right? Um, so I got my license generally late, right? I got it just right before my mission. I was delaying it. I was able to just throughout my high school time, friends just had cars, so I was like, okay, I'll just in your car, right? And it was terrible, right? So I should have gone in when I was 16, but got it right before my mission was 18. And so I was, so let alone, I barely knew how to drive automatic. And now I'm here in a Corsa, driving kind of manual on the other side of the road, right, with Elder Gregerson. And I'm terrible terrible to say on stream, or on podcast, but I'm terrible with directions, right? So put that all together, and just the stereotype. It's just I was perpetuating the stereotype big time, right? But anyways, Elder Gregerson, I just remember just vividly, for better or for worse. Everyone, Gregerson's like, Elder Wong, you missed that turn. Turn right, turn left, turn right, and it was just I wouldn't say that summed up our time together, but essentially, and I hope Eric, you can come on call, just correct anything I'm saying wrong, right? But
That's
but but I think it was, just joking aside, just a growing time for me, and maybe for Elder Gregerson as well. But just where I was, it was tough love. It was kind of a lot of just adversity and just getting through that, right? And that brings me, stop me at any time, guys. I'm just going to keep going. But
You're good.
which brings me to kind of Elder Lucas. And so and Christian, and Christian was just one. I think just right off the bat, I think we just had just really good, just got along kind of well, and had good chemistry. Again, I think now is a good point to point out, again, just clearing the air here, that there was one, I am not, first of all, I'm not a racial profiler. I'm not a racial profiler of Asian people. I know Christian was only joking, right? But essentially just clearing the air here, guys, just in case. But yes, Christian. So I watched the podcast. You asked me to, I did. And I'm not a racial profiler, but means we have a great relationship. We keep in touch. Of the individuals I keep in touch with on occasion, and by keep in touch, he reaches out to me. Is we chat on occasion. He's an obviously an upstanding guy. You've had him on the podcast, so you know that for sure. But I think while I say that, looking back, I wonder sometimes, like, wow, what I did that, right? Because I think at that point I was to the point of, okay, because I also felt like a little bit of this pressure, right? Is okay, I'm this Chinese speaking missionary. I need to produce. I need to do something, right? I need to show some sort of value, right? And so essentially, I think with Christian, that was the time I was like, okay, no more pressure. I'm just going to be me. Whatever happens, happens, right? And we'll just let, Heavenly Father, I give myself to you and this work, and let's just see where it goes, right? And so, so I'm not surprised Christian said the things he said, right? Because, I would essentially, I would just be to the point where I want someone to teach, and I want to kind of will this into existence, right? So I'd be to the point where, I was on the bus, and if anyone that looked remotely Asian, right, I just sat next to them. Didn't matter. I just sat next to them. I just started talking to them. And at this point as well, we were on Princess Street, right? We were just in Edinburgh, the High Street,
Yep.
right? And so we had a flat out there. And so a lot of our time was also spent tracting just on Princess Street. And so I kid you not, it was, I'm perhaps embarrassed to say this, but when I saw someone that, felt like had potential, I'd just be like, hey, stop, or hey, I try to get their attention somehow, right? I think part of it was more being kind of me, just again, just saying, I don't want to be part of the shell or mold anymore. I just want to be me. I just want to do things my way and see how it goes, right? And so part of that was maybe where that boldness came from, but again, I think there was honestly some success from that. We saw kind of some success from that eventually, right? But it just came to the point where I don't know if it was necessarily no fear, but it was more, I've been rejected, or I have no teaching pool. I think whatever I do, it doesn't matter, right? I just need to follow the Spirit. I just need to, and that's where I kind of really felt I was becoming more in tune with the Spirit, because when I just felt impressed and I was like, okay, that guy, it's like, okay, I'm gonna go talk to him, right? And that's how it was. So
I think that's great. It takes most of us, like a year or more to reach that point where we're like, hey, the most effective person I can be is me.
Mm-hmm.
It was Elder Bryce or Elder Hewlett that was called to Scotland, not some cookie cutter mold of a missionary. So sounds like you got there before we did, which is great.
Yeah, and sometimes, Jack, sometimes like the desperation of not having people to teach, that kind of accelerates that a bit, right? And so I think while we didn't see a lot of success with when with Elder Lucas, but it was a great time. I think that's when I was starting to figure things out. That's when I was starting to say, okay, we're going to do basketball. We're going to do basketball with a purpose. We're going to, we're going to teach English class, but this is how we're going to do it. This is how we're going to plan things. This is, certain areas. If we're going to go tracking our Princess Tree, we're going to be efficient about this. This is where we're going to go, right? Essentially, kind of most, of my teaching pool was essentially either at restaurants, right, or and at around universities, right? So I can't tell you the amount of times I've been kicked off kind of the Edinburgh kind of university campus, right, by security. I'm sure we're like frenemies, or if I go back, they'll still remember me. But it was just that just just like, okay, I don't have anything else to lose. Let's just do this, right? And essentially, when I it's surprising when I started just letting go of that persona, that's when the success just started to come, right?
Yeah.
And it was great, and Elder Lucas just really helped with that, because I think we were just really both focused, right? And Elder Lucas was someone that just isn't Christian. Don't let this get to your head, but if you ever watch this, but he wasn't someone, because I would always worry, I think, before then, hey, is it okay? Do I need to keep Elder Lucas kind of informed in this lesson, where we're going and things like that? And with Elder Lucas, I felt like there's more of, just a complete trust, right? So, it was just more, I could do this, and then it'd be like, hey, Elder Lucas, this is what's going on, right? And I think Elder Lucas was also very quick, or I think we understood each other, so he was very quick enough to kind of catch on and pick things up. So it was great, and it was just great serving with him, because we were, I'm competitive about certain things. Other things I'm not. Elder Lucas is just competitive about all things, perhaps. But again, Christian, that's a compliment. But anyways, I think we would, on P days, right? We would, play basketball, right? And Christian sometimes, like, he would, I think this is what makes him great, right? Is he has the confidence to say, hey, I can take you in this. I'm like, yeah, there's some things like football. Yeah, I give to Christian, right? On P days, chair football, he wins most games more than me, right? But if it's table tennis or if it's basketball, no. So we, I don't know if we got to the point where we were keeping a tally, but every P day was something different, right? We were competing at something, and it was great. It was just a great time, and also just time to just really kind of be away sometimes, and I don't know if this was talked about too much on the podcast, or and things like that, nor does it maybe need to go into too much depth. But sometimes I just felt there's a lot, right? A mission's a roller coaster, right? You're planning, you're doing things, and you're it's highs and lows, right? And someone's getting baptized, you schedule someone for baptism, someone fell through, etc. And so just time where you can have with like someone that understands you, just to kind of just get away for a little bit. And those P days, just I remember vividly, kind of not very spiritually driven, but a lot of competition, sometimes a lot of frustration, but it was great, right? And it was just a great time. And I think, but then again after that, that's when I think we really started seeing success, when Elder Ehat came in. So Tim Ehat, he's from Linden, Utah. I don't know if you all, maybe if I have an opportunity, you can have him on. But he's, I think he's still in Utah now. But he's, he was the companion that I served with the longest. And in my area, that's saying something, because I think I've had a total of 8 or 9 companions, which isn't that many, right?
Mm-hmm.
For 2 years. I think on average, my companions were 3 months or 4.5 months. And don't do the math, because again, that probably doesn't add up, right? But I was with Tim for about 6 months, and so
Wow.
I think, I think cumulatively, I think in that time, I think we probably was one of the most successful times in my mission. That's when we really started figuring things out.
I
And
thought that you served in the same area your whole mission. Is that true?
it is.
Okay.
It is.
But
So
I also thought you got a new companion every 6 weeks. Like they just cycled them through because they weren't Chinese speaking. So 6 weeks in, 6 weeks out. But you had 9. That means you got more than 6 weeks with quite a few of them.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think, and Jack, I think that makes sense, right? Is, they would perhaps cycle through, but I think part of it as well is, I think, this is just me just maybe blowing smoke or making things up, but I think part of it was also, well, maybe a more kind of longer term comparatively companion, just so we can kind of establish some chemistry. The investigators were teaching kind of, it's not kind of transitioning all the time, right? But I think with Elder Ehad, that's when we were seeing kind of more of the success, right? And Elder Ehad and I, surprisingly, I think he's again one of the ones that I keep in touch with more often than not here, and he was just great companion. We keep in touch, and we kind of stay updated on each other's lives and things. But that's really kind of the time when we started figuring things out. That's when we had our very first baptism, which was, his name was Addy. That was his English name. He was a restaurant owner, and he was just textbook, just a very kind of very in a way kind of just an embodiment of the textbook kind of Chinatown investigator, in the sense that he's lived in China most of his life, came here to kind of make a living, sent money home to his family. So more of his life here was more about opening restaurants, surviving, more than anything, right? And when we kind of met him, it was at his restaurant. Again, I think this was more of kind of the desperation, no fear thing. Just anywhere we went, I was just like, hey, we're missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Are you interested in our message, right? And so he was interested, and it's so interesting because, and maybe I can take a quick segue, is one of the things I started learning to figure out, and I think Elder DePold was really helpful in this, and I think you'll have Elder DePold on, right, Jonathan? But helping me to understand, and you Yi as well, or this other member missionary, but helping me to understand, okay, there's a different way to teaching, right? Because in Chinese culture, sometimes the perception of Christianity is not really kind of mainstream, right? They've probably heard of it, from third-party sources, and probably kind of understand that's the thing in America, but for all intents and purposes, that's not really kind of a part of their everyday kind of way of life. It's more kind of, okay, I rely on myself, right? So instead of, this was, and it was great because this was the time I was trying to hone that kind of teaching by the Spirit, and starting instead of kind of saying, hey, Gospel of Jesus Christ, restoration of Gospel of Jesus Christ, plan of salvation. And I think this was inspired because I think that's the beauty of preach my gospel in a right way, right? You could be flexible in that sense, right? And so helping them understand, plan of salvation, and then gospel of Jesus Christ, etc. But long story short, he Addy, he kind of felt the Spirit so quick, right? And I think by lesson 2 or 3, we scheduled him, for baptism for the next month, and it was wonderful. It was our first baptism, and it was just amazing because to see his growth. Because for a restaurant owner, Sundays are one of your kind of money making days, right? In terms of kind of when people are off, and he either kind of every Sunday, until we moved to Brighton or Bournemouth, and to Southern England, he would be at church, right? And keep in mind, this is Edinburgh Ward. This is everyone speaking English, right? And there are kind of Chinese community chapels, churches, like in all over it, not all over Edinburgh, but in other areas of Edinburgh, they're accessible, right? But he chose to come to, to the Edinburgh Ward to be a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And his commitment was just amazing because every week he'd show up. I translate for him, but he'd meet other people in the church, and he didn't really know too much English, but he'd be, be like, hello, and everyone, the Lord was great in fellowshipping. And so it was, it was amazing to see just his commitment. He'd be there every Sunday, regardless, right? And that just stuck out in my mind, and that just really, after that first baptism, it was just just a chain of events. I think in that time with Elder Ehad, and again, you can cut this out, right? But I can take pride in saying we baptized Jackie Chan, we baptized Avira Wang, so and we baptized several other people, other people as well, and that was when we just started kind of getting into a groove. And Elder Ehad and I think a reason why we were kind of a companionship for 6 months as well is, again, just the chemistry. He was able to, just essentially some of the teachers were in English, but sometimes when it was just in all Chinese, I think just kudos to all my companions out there, because it's just as I think about this now, I'm like, I just don't know how you all did that, just to sit through like a full Chinese lesson and just to not exactly know what was going on and to just trust your companion, right? And I think we were able to kind of do that and just work out a good system for that, right? And that was great. I think I think one of the just a funny story from kind of the time with Elder Ehad is, and I don't know, I don't know if these are actually exciting, guys, because I don't have stories with Neds where I'm being chased down by Neds and stuff like that. So, which I'm grateful for, just
Yeah.
being in kind of the warm embrace of Edinburgh for 2 years. So, I guess that I'm a softie in this way, but I think an interesting story with Elder Ehad was there's just one zone conference. I think a general authority was there. I don't recall his name, um, but essentially it was planned out. So essentially it was to demonstrate the teaching model for Preach My Gospel. Right, there was a way to teach. There was I don't remember it kind of fully now, but essentially kind of share the message, bear testimony. There's a way to invite, promise, and then extend the invitation to baptism, right? This general authority was there, and he was witnessing this, and essentially it's this teaching model to teach, a before and after, right? Is essentially, okay, this is the first way, and then after you listen to kind of our, the kind of guidance, right, from the zone leaders, etc. We're going to do this again, right? And so I think the zone leaders, I think it's Elder Hardy and Elder Balkle. I'm sorry, guys. We didn't mean to raise our hand. But essentially, what happened was I think they had like certain missionaries plan to raise their hand, right, to do the demonstration, to make this more of a controlled environment. But so I don't think they were expecting other missionaries to raise their hand and say, hey, does anyone want to volunteer to try this out first? And so I don't know why we volunteered, but Elder Ihan and I were just like, okay, let's just do it. And I think part of it was also because I think, close to that time, I think Elder Ihan and I were just like, okay, we had some kind of a friendly kind of discussion, okay, the way of teaching, right? And so we both wanted to demonstrate our way was kind of better. And so, we thought, okay, let's just do it at Zoe conference. This is just a natural kind of makes sense to do in front of everyone. And if it blows up in our face, so be it, right? But anyways, I think that's what we did. So we raised our hands like, does anyone want to demonstrate the teaching model? And so like, okay, we do. And then the zone leaders or everyone just got kind of someone's like, you do? Are you sure? Like, yeah, we do. Like we didn't know what was going on, right? And so when we did, it was so interesting because at that point, like this is not to brag or anything at all, but I think, for some reason, like at that point, Elder Ehat and I just synced, right? In terms of just kind of our teaching styles just synced. Maybe it was just from 6 months of being together, or whatever it may be. But it was, it was pretty textbook, right? And so because afterwards, I think the plan was to ask everyone to raise their hand and say, hey, what could I have done? They done better, right? And so I distinctly remember we taught that, and the spirit was so strong, right? That was just a testament to me. It was like, hey, you're here for a reason, right? You're actually you can kind of do this, right? And then it was reaffirmed because after that, when the zone leaders asked, what do you think can be done better? And so because we were the first ones to go, we were supposed to be, the guinea pigs, or to say, hey, this is what you could have done better, and et cetera, guidance, and here's the actual way to do it. You guys suck, right? And what was interesting was it was silent. And then someone raised their hand, or zone leader, someone raised their hand. I think it might have been a district leader or what have you, said, okay, yeah, guys, instead of saying, you shouldn't have said you guys, you just should have said you instead, or something like really minor like that. I'm like, oh wow, that's it. I can take that, right? I'm okay with that, right? And then I just think I made the zone leaders like really difficult at that at least at that particular time, because I think they had everything planned out. They wanted to make it look organic, and we just messed things up, right? We just messed things up. And then afterwards, in I think that second run around, I think either the zone leaders or someone else was doing it, and I think they were visibly nervous because like you know this how and we're not trying to tune our own horn or anything, but it's like they just I think felt a lot of pressure. It's like, okay, this happened, how do we like make this better or whatever. So that was I think that was just one kind of interesting moment with Elder He had, because I think we honestly we had kind of our disagreements, but we were able to kind of work through it. And I think that's a reason why we're still kind of pretty close to this day, right? Is because we went through that. We went through kind of 6 months together, and as a companionship. It's funny how that works, right? You guys probably understand that more than me.
Only for boys. You get
Only
in a fight and then you're best friends after.
right.
Girls doesn't work that way.
Doesn't work that way, right?
I can attest to that. My gosh, I had a couple of companions. We won't divulge into
Let's
that
hear
too
it. Let's
deep.
hear it. Let's hear everything, names and everything. Let's hear it.
Well, if you listen to Elder Kings, we had our marriage spat, and we got on pretty well after that. I haven't talked to Elder Pattenden yet, but I don't know how well we got along, Stuart Pattenden, but to be continued. Stuart, come on the podcast. Let's talk about it.
Understood. Yeah, I didn't mean to rile things up, Zach. So.
No. No, you're
No, but
perfectly fine.
yeah, but I think that's essentially, I think, just trial by adversity, and it's sometimes how it just adversity brings you closer together, right? And I think that's exactly what happened with Elder Ian. I'm not trying to be over dramatic here and say like we never got along, because we got along, right? And it was just just working through adversity that just brought us a lot closer.
That's
And
great.
so
That's amazing.
yeah, so it's really interesting how things work out, and then I think from that point on, I think I started to get into a groove, right, or to understand kind of how things work, and at that point as well with it was great because we started having recent converts, right? So we could start taking them on teaches, and again, the Edinburgh Ward was fairly kind of great about just fellowshipping, right, and making sure if that our church, they said hi and things like that, and things like that. So we did get support from the ward, and I think it helps as well if you're a familiar face, like you're there for the long haul, and they know that. So for better or for worse, they need to come up and say hi to you, right? So
Right.
but I think it was just great. I think because I think my next companion was Elder Smith, and so he's Elder Smith. I don't know if y'all know him. He's actually in the same MTC group as me in Scotland. So when we came to Scotland, I was in the same group as I don't know if you had Tobias Halford on yet. So I was in Elder Halford's group with Elder Smith, and terrible names or memory, but I came on with other kind of 3 or 4 other elders, and I think perhaps a sister as well. But Elder Smith and I, again, I think we're starting to just get into a groove with teaching and things. And I think one thing I remember distinctly with Elder Smith is, and it might have been earlier in the mission, but for some reason I had this naive perception that Chinatown was anywhere Chinese people were. It didn't matter if it was Aberdeen, Glasgow, Inverness, Dundee, wherever it is Chinese people are, I can go. At times even without permission of the zone leaders. And so there's a time, because there's a strong focus on essentially kind of 2 main things on the mission. You've heard this as a trend, right? Is member missionary work and hammer time, or a variation of hammer time, right? And so as a part of that, there was just a longstanding kind of Chinese kind of member family, I think the Chews, if I remember correctly, in Glasgow. And so they were great. We went up once with Elder Lucas. I didn't realize Elder Lucas got permission before. So had I known that, I would have asked for permission first. But essentially, essentially we went up with I think it was Elder Smith, might have been Elder Ehab, but we were kind of helping we had this great kind of member missionary lesson plan. We're like, hey, let's just go up, and I think they're free. Let's call Sister Chu and Brother Chu, and let's go up and teach them. And so that's what we did. We took the train without telling anyone, just went up, taught them, went up to Glasgow, taught them, came back home. And then lo and behold, I think we got a call at like 9 o'clock or 9:30. We were still on the train, and Elder Smith kind of answered. And then I think the elder was like, I don't remember who it was. It might have been Hardy and Bacall. I don't, I'm pretty sure Hardy and Bacall don't like me that much, just from everything that I'm doing. I'm only kidding. They were great. But but I think, I got a call. It was from them or either the assistants or whoever it was. Essentially Elder Smith's like, it's for you. And so I'm like, hey, and they were really nice about it. They're like, hey, Elder Wong, where are you? I'm like, oh yeah, I still didn't know what I was doing wrong, right? So it's like, yeah, I'm a train back from Glasgow. We just have to choose an awesome member, awesome teach, and things like that. And we're heading back to Edinburgh. It's like, okay, Elder Wong, just remember, next time if you decide to go outside the area, tell us, right, or get our permission before you go. not after, or tell us, right? And I remembered that distinctly because that kind of because I had some kind of just lofty sometimes dreams kind of on my mission, right? I was kind of after finding out about kind of my call, I think I went up to Pratt's Hill. So I'm circling back a little bit, and I was like, okay, by the time I leave my mission, I want to have like a Chinese branch in Scotland. There's something crazy, right? And so I was, and so kind of that was something that always drove me in a way. And so I'd always kind of, I don't know, and this I think just kind of tacked onto that, just made me do crazy stuff, guys. So like for example that, right? And so I would kind of work that in as well. We're gonna have branch, and then eventually I think that dream was killed because I think essentially they're like, okay, Justin, that's not Elder Wong, it's not gonna happen, right? This is integration into the ward, not kind of create your own branch here. That's not what you're here to do, right? And so but anyways, I think I digress there. But essentially, I think it was just an exciting time. I think another time just with Elder Smith was just you probably heard kind of different feelings about Hammer Time right throughout the podcast, right? And I don't think I'm the exception here, but I think one thing great that came out of this kind of concept of Hammer Time, or essentially we had a variation of this for a month in Edinburgh. Essentially, I think it was called Operation Fill the Font. Probably butchered the names. Probably called something else. But essentially, it was essentially we were going to get this amount of baptisms in this month, right? And we're on the end stretch, and I think we were kind of one or two short. And so it was at the end of the month. And so kind of I think the zone leaders or just with faith, they filled the font for that Sunday. It was Sunday already. It wasn't Saturday. It was at the end of the month, it was Sunday. Right. And then, for some reason I felt, and I think Elder Smith felt, or Elder Ehab felt this way as well, just going into that Sunday, I was like, this just feels like a weird kind of Sunday, it just feels like something's going to happen today. Right. And I think we're praying because I think all the district or the zone was praying that we can meet our goal and things like that. And then lo and behold, this guy, he's not even and sometimes the beauty, I guess, of being a Chinese speaking missionary is anyone that again looks remotely, again, you can edit this out, looks remotely Chinese comes to the Chinese speaking missionaries, right? So, and this is kind of what happened. So we had his name was Jun Young Soo, he's Korean, right? And his backstory was he's being taught by the missionaries in Wales. For a couple weeks or a month or so, and so he was kind of. I didn't know this until afterwards, but he was extended the invitation to baptism, but he had to think about it. He wasn't really committed, and then he just took a weekend trip. This is like a spur of the moment trip up to Edinburgh, and so he came up to Edinburgh. Lo and behold, he came to church. We didn't chap into him or track into him. We didn't invite him, but came to church, and he said, I was like, oh, hey, Elder Wong, I think there's a guy there. Do you want to talk to him? Or like he he looks of Asian descent. How do you put this in a PC way? But he looks of Asian descent, and so let's and so I was like, okay. And so anyways, that whole day felt like, okay, something's gonna happen. And so everything went well. We're like, hey, we're Elder, it's Elder Wong, it's Elder Smith, we're here, here to say hi. And he was great, right? That was back then during 3-hour church, right? So sacrament, I think there's gospel doctrine or gospel principles, and then elders quorum, right? And all through that, it was great. It was just a normal day, it was like, okay, yeah, I'm from Wales, I'm going back. And then all of a sudden we had this impression that, okay, it was like, let's just sit him down, just have a quick lesson with him, just run through the baptismal interview questions. And so I think for some reason at that time, we're going on splits as well, because I think we had another investigator there. So Elder Smith went to teach someone else. And so I was with June or Young Soo, and I was a young man was with me. We were on splits, and his name's Aaron Mateer, awesome young man. And at the time, obviously not a young man anymore, right? But so we just sat down and we're like, hey, we just felt impressed to kind of just walk through the interview questions with you, just answer them as truthful as you can, and we're just trying to understand kind of where you're at and the like. And so we just went through the baptismal interview questions with them, and he was answering kind of all of them as he should have, right? And so Do you have a testimony of, the recitation of the gospel of Jesus Christ, Prophet Joseph Smith? Yes, right. Do you have a testimony of the atonement of Jesus Christ? Yes. And will you keep the law of chastity? Yes. We keep the word of wisdom? Yes. And so at the end, after he answered all the questions, um, we just, I felt impressed, or we felt impressed to essentially say, hey, this is crazy, because we didn't, again, I think the desperation part of me that kind of helped with this, right? Because I think that a normal person would probably say, okay, there's process to this. You can't just invite him. He's leaving, right? It makes no sense, right? But then I was just okay, let's just do this, right? I feel like I should do this, and Elder Harding, Elder Baca, whoever can just manage this after. Again, sorry guys, right? But I guess Elder Zack, I guess, and Jack, you should be grateful that I wasn't in your zone, I guess, is what I'm saying. But no, but long story short, I think we invited him to baptism and said, hey, you answered kind of correctly all these questions. What's stopping you from getting baptized? Would you accept the invitation to be baptized today? He sat there for a little while, and we're like, oh, and then me and Aaron looked at each other. I was like, oh, we rocked the boat. This guy's probably gonna walk out now and shut the door, and he's gone, right? And we probably destroyed this opportunity for these missionaries in Wales too, right? But essentially, after he thought for a moment, he's like, yes, right, yes. And then after that, it was kind of like a mad rush, right? That's when we were like, okay, what do we do? I didn't think you'd say yes, man. Like, what? And so I should have known, right? Spirit prompted. So but then essentially, we filled the font, or the font was filled, and we had to, I think, and that's when I think the zone leader stepped in, and they took care of things moving forward then. But essentially, they had to get special permission from President Fredrick to get this done, and pretty sure calls were made, and he was baptized same day. So it's
amazing.
It's crazy. It's crazy. So, honestly, there's, with hammer time, there's a lot there, right? There's a lot of stress that comes with that. But, at times, there's some gold nuggets like this, that come out of that. And so that was just, one thing I remember distinctly, I believe, with Elder Smith is just that experience there. It was amazing. So,
that is cool.
Yeah. So guys, I could keep going, and I'm halfway through, and I know kind of, we're probably right on time here. So just stop me.
Whatever you want to share.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I'll try to be brief, or kind of not put you guys to sleep. Let me think. What else to share? I have this whole bullet point list that I'm kind of staring at. So I think maybe some other quick experiences is with some other companions. Is I think just experience if you just don't know kind of who someone is on the inside from a perception perspective. I think this was with my next companion. I think with Elder Ray. And Elder Ray, Elder Ehat, I believe, was kind of my most successful, or our most successful, kind of from a numbers, right, or statistics perspective, just baptismal kind of numbers. Elder Ray was, I think, the most successful transfer. I think we had 3 baptisms within that transfer. And one of them, surprisingly enough, was this man named Nicholas Wong. And so I think, remember how I said basketball was kind of a successful finding activity. This was one of those examples. I think Nicholas, we by this time we've been kind of running basketball, kind of this activity for a year and a half. Had kind of taught investigators, never some close to baptism, never really kind of one that really kind of was a golden investigator or a friend that kind of committed, right, or was kind of strong or felt the spirit, right. And so this particular, and if you look at Nicholas Wong on the outside, if I were to describe him, let me describe him, because I think you guys can resonate with this with basketball style, right? Nicholas, and there's a reason why I think I didn't approach him. He was one of the very last guys I approached to invite him to kind of for us to teach him, right? And the reason was, in basketball, he was just short, stocky guy, but essentially, in the spy law, kind of for the Edinburgh chapel, it's not a huge chapel anyway, so there's a lot of post game going on, right? In the chapel, right? It's like the small half court, so a lot of post, game, right? A lot of bumping. Nicholas, he wasn't really tall. He was big though, and he played so there was an NBA comparison. It was like a Charles Oakley, Charles Barkley mix with a little bit of Ben Wallace in him too. And so, and he was tatted up, and he was nice, but like on the court, he fought, right? Like, I thank goodness I like just was like more of a shooting guard, if that was even a thing there. But like, I just play more on the outside, drive and cut a couple times, right? And that's it, right? But with him, he was always on the inside. He's like, give me the ball, and then he just like, no one really knew how to play or call. And there was probably tons of fouls that were had, right? But essentially, knock him out, bank it in. That was it. If you had Nick on your team, just pass it to Nick. You kind of win by brute force, right?
Sounds like
And
Dennis
so,
Rodman.
yeah, and he got rebounds too. So yeah, exactly like Dennis Rodman. Maybe without the hair, but with the tats. So,
Okay, all right.
But essentially, there was one time, and I think it was Elder Smith that kind of pushed me. He's like, "Hey, we should talk to Nicholas." I'm like, "Are you sure?" Like, we always like mention Nicholas in our planning sessions. Like, "Are you sure?" And then we'd always like, for one reason or another, we'd like, "Oh, we'll wait till next time, right?" Or we'll wait till next time to invite him. And then finally, like he like I remember distinctly because he left the building. Like, we were done with ball for that day, for basketball. Like, that day, I think it was always Saturday morning. I don't remember, but it was kind of during kind of a low kind of tracking time. And so Saturday morning was, when a lot of people were kind of available. And so we played, and he was already at his car. He was he was opening his trunk, I remember distinctly putting his duffel bag in his car, getting ready to go. And I just walked up, I just ran up to him. I was like, "Hey, Nick, hey, stop for a moment," and kind of like, "Hey, hear me out," right? And like in my mind, I'm just like, my heart's beating. I'm like, I don't know what this guy's going to do to me. We'll see what happens, right? And so like, "Hey, are you interested in hearing kind of, about our message? You've played with us for like." This is terrible. We should have invited him early, like 6 months ago. And so essentially, we asked him, "Hey, you probably know, we're playing at this church. We're missionaries. We have a message, regarding the gospel of Jesus Christ. We'd like to share with you. Are you interested?" And at that point, I was like, "Are you sure, man? I'm just here to play basketball. Buddy. See you later, right?" But essentially, it was quick. He essentially said, "Yeah, yeah." And when we went over, he was like, it was just night and day. I guess you can't really just judge a book by its cover, but because he was one of the most kind of inquisitive, kind of sincere investigators we had. And I think within that month, I think we were teaching him, and then Elder Ray came in. But within that month, he was baptized. And so it's just amazing. You just can't kind of judge a book by its cover, right? And so, but Zack, I have kind of many more stories to kind of share, but in the interest of time, maybe I'll kind of cut it short here. If you have questions for me,
Who else
have
did
at
you
it. But
who else did you serve with?
I served with maybe another quick story. So I served with Elder, and maybe a very important kind of, I shouldn't leave this out. So I served also with total 8 or 9 companions. I think I mentioned 4 or 5 of them. And I served with also Elder Donovan Oliver. Zack, you might know Donovan.
Yeah.
And I served with Elder Burnett, Andreas Burnett. I think he's from, I believe, Utah. He I think came after both of you, and so I don't know if you know Elder Burnett, but he's great. You should probably have him on too, because he trained the next Chinese-speaking missionary. So it'd be good to get his perspective. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The actual kind of 2.0 version that actually did great work, right? But I believe, in a nutshell, those are my companions. I'm probably missing a few in between, so I'm sorry. To everyone. If you're listening, I'm so sorry.
You wrote. I got 9. I wrote them down.
Perfect. So maybe I'm right here. Maybe I'm not missing anyone. But I think with Elder Oliver, it was there was one. If I can, just one member. Her name is Jessica. We kind of, and again, we kind of just stopped her. This is Edinburgh University. Again, our friends, the security guards at Edinburgh University. It was just a good day. We didn't get kicked out. So, and I think we were on one of the side roads too. So it was like a public area. But anyways, we stopped her. She was like a PhD student from Taiwan. She's studying at Edinburgh University. And I think this is just a testament of member missionary work and just great fellowship. We had a member in the ward. Her name was Roxanne Paris. And I will always remember one thing she said to me. But Roxanne, if you're watching this, I'm sorry for bringing this up. But she, because I could be someone, especially on the mission, I get laser focused. I'm like, will you come on a joint teach with us? Why can't you come? Right? This is like the most important thing you should be doing in your life ever. Missionary work or die. Right? But not maybe not to that degree. But anyways, his parents is like, one day, Elder Wong, you understand there's more to life than missionary work, and there is and there's not. Right? But and so I always remember that. But with her, she was always kind of supportive, and always kind of wanting to help and things. And with Jessica, I just remember distinctly, we taught her all the lessons. And there was just one point we were committing her to baptism, and she was just not sure, right? And so, and she was, I think, almost ready to perhaps drop us, because I think we might have been kind of maybe pushing too hard, or maybe it was just at the end where she, we already taught her everything, and she was reading through the Book of Mormon and things, and then we just decided, we felt impressed, and I think this was more Elder Oliver, right? We just felt impressed to schedule another teach with her, with Roxanne, who she's built a relationship with, and I think the lesson was just more on having no fear, with Peter walking on water and things, and kind of going kind of, I think, sharing kind of scriptures along that vein in that aspect. And I think just with us testifying and also with Roxanne testifying, I think Jessica committed to baptism. And I think to this day, I think one of the I believe is still active. And so we saw her, a couple years back, and she was in Brighton. I think she's back in Taiwan now, but she's still active, and it was great. And yeah, but just a quick funny story. The reason, that was important. That was the story I wanted to share. But also with Elder Oliver, I thought at that point, and my wife tells me every day, she's like, Justin, your Chinese is terrible, right? But anyways, like I thought at that point, I was like, I have a mastery of the Chinese language and stuff like that, and so I was just kind of a little bit arrogant about it. So on our kind of, we had like in our flat like a dry erase board where you just like plan stuff, like high level stuff, and then I wrote in characters. I just wrote, and Elder Oliver, he knows this, right? Because Elder Oliver, if you know Donovan, I think Zack, if you know, he's not a man of too many words, right? He's not silent. He's very insightful, right? Very smart, very intelligent, right? Very intelligent. But and if you if you sometimes get on his bad side, he has this glare, or he has this okay. I don't know if you've seen it, Zack, and maybe I'm just over dramatizing or making things up, but he'll look at you a certain way, and you might fear for death or for your life, right? And one of those moments was and sorry, Donovan, maybe I shouldn't have shared that. But anyways, I think, the reason why I say that is because I was just very arrogant. I felt like, okay, yeah, I know the Chinese language, and I was just kind of just doing kind of stupid stuff, right? So I was on our planning board, I wrote kind of, Elder Oliver is not smart. And you get my drift. It was in Chinese, and then it was just, I think we had that relationship though. Perhaps we don't. Donovan, you can correct me, or you can come on. You just say, Elder One, we didn't, and that was offensive. But but I left it on it, and I was just like, as a prank, I was like, yeah, Elder Oliver, that just means you're really smart, right? And awesome, right? And then Yu Yi, because we had a great relationship with this member missionary, Yu Yi. Zack, you might have met him, but essentially he was, he'd sometimes kind of come into our flat, right? And so he saw that. He's like, Elder Oliver, do you know what this says? and so like I was too good. Like it was at the end of transfer. He didn't know it was at the beginning of transfer when I wrote that. It was at the end of transfer. And when Yu was like, Elder Oliver, do you know that? I'm like, hey, Yu, don't spoil the fun here. But then he was like, this is what it actually says. And then Elder Oliver, I got that look. Right, I got that look. He's like, Elder Wong, you're gonna pay for this, and I won't tell you what happened, but I never did that ever again. Let's just put it that way. So,
come on, you gotta tell us what happened now.
So he's much taller than me. He's much bigger than me. I'm pretty sure there was some wrestling involved. Pretty sure I got kind of just dominated. So that's kind of what happened. And so suffice it to say that never happened again. But it's just so interesting. I recall that story just now. But anyway, it's just a lot of in summary, just just a lot of on my mission as a Chinese speaking missionary. Sometimes I thought yeah, I'm so much different now. There's really when it comes down to it, I think there's just a lot of similarities. Just following the Spirit. Learning how to get along, understanding kind of working together as a companionship in a different way, right? Learning to cater to your investigators, overcoming adversity, not doing stupid stuff, not going to Glasgow without permission, things like that. I think, like, just in summary, I think, just everything, I'm sure you all had kind of similar experiences, right? But perhaps just, for me, just a different perspective, and the only perspective I know, and to me, serving in an area for 2 years, having a companion that doesn't speak, that was normal for me, right? And that was something, I got used to, and I found kind of, was able to kind of adjust to, and that just became my normal, right? And just, just at the end of my mission, even kind of preparing for this podcast and just reflecting now, there's just looking back, obviously there's some things that's like, man, that was just so dumb. Like, why did I do that? And like, there's other times it's like, wow, I went up to this person, did that. Why didn't I get arrested? And stuff like that. But maybe not to that degree, right? But it's just so interesting looking back, right? Just on kind of the different experiences and just like the great ones and not so great ones, right? And just being able to kind of learn from that. But hopefully, guys, hopefully at least I gave kind of a snippet, or maybe kind of into the chaos or madness that was kind of Elder Wong, right? On my mission. But
you have a different perspective than the rest of us, for sure, which I really appreciate. We're looking for diversity in our podcast too, from different backgrounds of people, and everybody had a different experience in Scotland, no matter what language they were speaking or what we were hearing over there. So we really appreciate it.
Yeah, and more than anything, you were a trailblazer. It's not like that was even a concept of a thought prior to you getting there. And clearly, when President Fredrick found out that you were fluent in Chinese, he was like, okay, how can I best utilize this young man's talents to not necessarily like enhance your missionary experience, but we all have different talents for a reason, right? And that was just a unique avenue that you were the willing body to try and to put into effect. And I mean, if your last companion, Elder Burnett, was able to teach the next one, I'm hoping that it's still happening today, but I have no idea, obviously. But still, nonetheless, you did something that none of us, and I'm going to tell you right now, I have no idea who the other missionary was after you, but none of us experienced what you did. But we really, really are. I'm so impressed with you and your willingness to stick that out, because I'm sure there were really tough times, but more than anything, you were able to give something to those people, that you were able to touch their lives that none of us could have, which that was why you were there. I'm sure of it.
yeah, no, I think I completely agree, Zach. I think this is a cop-out answer. You probably hear this from everyone, but I think that it was just one of the most challenging times and most rewarding times, right? And I can tell you, just the skill set you learn from mission, you take on with you in life, right? And not everything, right? There's not many things can prepare you for marriage, right? But that's a whole different podcast, probably, right? But and hopefully, but anyways, yeah, I think just just building upon that, like part of my career, right, has been kind of just utilizing the Chinese language, and had I not, I think, understood or maybe not the technicalities, right? But I was able to hone that a little bit after the mission, but understanding, just getting kind of a peek further into culture, and understanding, and it was a blessing to me, right? Just understanding, kind of going back to my roots a little bit, and understanding that it really kind of lay a foundation for kind of after the mission and things. So I think I feel like there's a reason I was there, for people there, but at the same time, if nothing else, I think looking back on this now, like, even if there were no baptisms, right, I think just the value of the experiences you get there are just immeasurable, so cop out answer, I know, but it's just
It's true.
had to say it.
It is true, 100%.
Do you want to? We have no idea who this goes out to, who listens to it. Do you want to say give your 2 cents in Chinese to whoever may be tuning in. Some people are going to see, Justin Wong, I've heard on the other podcasts, and they'll be tuning in probably just to yours.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think most everyone can speak English, like that will watch this. But yeah, no, that reminds me of another story. But anyways, but I'm happy to share something if you like. But
yes,
okay,
go ahead.
And
story and all.
Okay, so I think yeah, I might share my testimony in Chinese, but I'll be share the story too, right?
Sure.
But I think there was a time where similar to Jack, what you were saying. I think on the mission, I was just at the point where I was like, okay, we have mainly Chinese-speaking recent converts here, and I would hopefully they understand English, but hopefully I just felt impressed to just share kind of my testimony in Chinese, and I think that the Lord was like, okay, Justin, we understand you're the Chinese speaking missionary. You don't need to show it to the world or whatever. And I was kind of aware of that. I was like, okay, I'm just making myself look like, I'm special or something. I don't think that was really the case, but it was just more kind of, I shared kind of something like this, like, I'll say in Chinese, right? Oh man, I haven't poured my testimony a long time in Chinese. So, 我知道神是活着的，我知道耶稣基督的福音是真实的，我知道圣米约瑟是有复兴我们的福音，奉耶稣基督的名，阿门。So that was, whoever is listening to this in Chinese, that was terrible. I'm sorry, right? But I think that was kind of the degree I went to just say, hey, can you, I would like to kind of take this a little further and just be able to kind of show them, hey, this is what it's like to, have church, if you were in Taiwan or if you were in kind of somewhere else, but for kind of the language, difference, it's the same, right? And I think that was what I was kind of really trying to show. And so I think Jack, maybe that wasn't really a story, but that just kind of came to mind, right? Is the importance of kind of hearing the gospel in your own language. But so hopefully I killed two birds with one stone there.
That's great.
I love it.
That's great. That is a unique part of our church, right? No matter where you go in the world, like I went for business for a couple of weeks down to Mexico and found the local chapel and went, and I was the only English speaker there and had no idea what those, like, it took me the whole elders quorum lesson to figure out they were talking about family history, just that. But it was the same format. I knew, like, I'm going to get the sacrament. We're going to have lesson. And that's something that's really special about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So that's great.
Well, is there any other of your, you mentioned some great people and your companions and some of the leadership that you spent time with. Is there any other missionaries from your time in Edinburgh that you want to call out and invite to come and share their experience on the podcast with us?
Yeah, I think any missionary that I mentioned, I probably didn't get the story right or the facts straight. So I'm sure one reason or another you'll get some, maybe angry calls or no calls at all. I don't know. But I think I think someone already you mentioned Elder Halford, right? I think Elder Halford would be great. Elder Smith, obviously Elder Oliver. I'm trying to think of others.
Is Elder Smith, is it Clint or is it Garrett?
Oh, good question. It's actually Jesse James. So I don't know if he was in my group. So he was, August 26, 2006 to 2008. So
you said his name was Justin?
Jesse James.
Oh, Jesse James.
Yes. Jesse James. Yeah.
Okay. I had to clarify because there was a couple other Elder Smiths that I knew. So that's cool. I can tell you right now, Elder Halford will be on in a few weeks. He's on our future schedule, so you will hear from him. And
that's great. I'm just glad I'm going before him rather than after. So I'm sure he'll have amazing and awesome stories to tell. So
yeah, and there's a few others that have been hesitant. I talked to Elder Gregerson, and he said, I don't know if that's my thing. Elder Oliver, I've been in touch with too, and he's giving it some thought. So hopefully this is enough encouragement that we'd love to have him and have him share his experience. mean, obviously that's the thing, is all of us have a different experience, and it is the truth according to you. This is the Justin Wong podcast. So we really appreciate you taking time just to share your perspective of how Scotland changed your life when you weren't necessarily knocking doors to hear people yell at you in Scottish.
Yeah. It was in Chinese, or it was with 70-year-old ladies, right? So it's just
There you
same
go.
difference. So
That's awesome. Well, good.
well, it's been a pleasure, guys, and hopefully, Zach and Jack, if I'm ever in Colorado, maybe we can officially get together. I think Zach, we've met on the mission briefly.
Yep.
I'm sorry
that's
I
right.
didn't remember that moment. I apologize, but
No, and uniquely enough, I've shared on my own podcast, but I didn't spend any time in the Edinburgh stake on my mission. So like the very rare instance that I had to visit Edinburgh was to go to the mission home and leave. So I didn't get a lot of that experience that some others did, and so you got all of my Edinburgh experience. You had it for me.
oh, great. I'm so honored for the day or however many hours you're there, right?
Exactly, 100%.
Thank you, Justin.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. You guys have a great day. I'm sure. Hopefully, we can get together another time.
Yeah,
and
absolutely, we will. We certainly love you and are grateful for you, and the brotherhood and the kinship we have from being fellow Scotland Edinburgh missionaries. So thanks again, Justin.
Yep, the feeling's mutual. Thank you again. Thank you so much for doing this. It was so great just to take a trip down memory lane and keep doing the great work, guys. Hope you're listening.
That. Thanks, Justin. All right, love you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.